Okay, so this next one we're going to talk about student survey, and we discussed kind of looking at perception data, where you look at the things that you did really well and can call out the things that you did to make that happen. You can look at the things that were lower and call out the things that you kind of would say, yeah, I could have told you that was going to be lower. I think that's because if you know what the issue is, you can remedy that. But it's the surprises and the things that kind of were out of the ordinary, or you felt you had done so much to support it, and it came out different than what you thought it was going to be. That's where we're going to kind of focus in on the student survey. Overall, you did really, really well. You're at a level 3, and you can see in the description that it's really about you demonstrating general caring and respect for students, and you're almost to that level 4. And I think you're always working towards that for students, and students do really well in your class. The focus for us was really that challenge and care, and like you see, you did really, really well in challenge. You were above the school average, and in care you were right under the school average. And like we talked about in the beginning of the year, that's really where we want, is that balance between pushing our students to the highest level, yet making sure they know that we care about them and that we'll be there for them to support them as people. And I think you did really well, and as a school we did really well. We were talking about kind of what surprises might be, and just kind of looking at the data. If you look at where the teacher data is, and then also school-wide, where would be the surprise? And I think as I did, your eye probably goes to this directly to one. Mm-hmm. And which one do you see kind of?
The teacher seems to know if something is bothering me.
Right.
My score is almost 0.6 lower than the average, so it's
right.
a big difference.
Right, and I think it's important to think, perception is reality, so I think important to think that students are answering this question. We also work with teenagers, and students are, not always readily willing to tell us if things are bothering them, but yet this is telling us that they want us to be perceptive enough to be able to know that. So thinking about, what are some things that we can put into place in order to support students in that and support teachers with that. But I think, like I said, overall, it is 1 out of a lot, and you did, really, really well in the student survey. But that's kind of the only one that I wanted to kind of just check in on and dig in a little bit. What are your thoughts on that?
I've always kind of taken student surveys with a grain of salt a little bit, and I don't want to do any disrespect to the pie, and I know it's important, and I know we need to hear those student voices.
Sure.
But I feel like there's so many factors that influence a 12-year-old or 13-year-old to answer these questions one morning before they've had breakfast, before they've woken up, the day before, our lesson went poorly and I had to send 3 kids out, and then they get randomly assigned to my group the next day.
Sure.
I just kind of been like, all right, it is what it is. We have to take those student surveys into account. Here is what it is. I did fine overall, which means we're good in my class. It's never been something that I've been super worried about, but it hasn't really changed because I feel like kind of the logistics and just the situation of it all doesn't really lend itself to being pure data. Like one data point in the morning, one day, I think I have much more evidence in my brain that counteracts some of the stuff that's on
Sure.
here, that I'm not kind of fazed by it, but at the same time it's kind of like, is this a fair assessment? Is there a way that we can do more periodic checks? Is there something else? So that even though I kind of take it with a grain of salt, it is counted into my score. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of one of those balancing acts. Do I, push the issue so much that it becomes a big thing even though it's a small portion, or I say every piece is important, we need to pay attention to all pieces of the pie, and this is something that I think can be improved.
Sure.
For next year, and as we continue to refine everything, this might be something we revisit. I know it's been revised before, and so this is a better iteration of what it was before, but I definitely think there's some ways that it can get better so it's more representative of what I actually do.
Sure. And I appreciate that, and I think you definitely hit on some really good topics, and I'll try to kind of talk through those. I think the one thing is yes, we are trying to make these the best representation of student perception data and supporting, so that it supports teachers in their growth, right? And in the end, this really is about giving teachers as much information as possible so that they can continue to grow in their practice. you talked about, is this as important? Is it an important part? I think in terms of what we believe is that is yes, that all of these pieces are important pieces of data. You talked about it as one piece of data, and sure, it's one of a lot of pieces. But I think I would push you to think deeply about, well, what are some things, if this is what the perception is, and we can only go with perception, that is reality, what are some things collectively, and not just you, but I think as a staff, as a school, as an organization, what are some things that we can start to really think about to ensure that we are getting as much information from these student surveys as possible? And what can we do as a school to set up structures in order to support students so they feel better about this part of it? And I think it is one out of a lot. But I think what you said was key in terms of, what is it that we can do to refine and get better at how we ask questions and survey people. Of course, that's where I would kind of give my plug and encourage you to be a part of the process, right? I mean, that we need smart educators who think deeply about these things, who care about these things, to be a part of the roundtables and be a part of the focus groups and the teacher panels and to provide feedback when those opportunities are given. And so let's talk more about that as we go into next year. How can I support you in having days to be released to give feedback, or to how can I support you in planning and work so that you can do the panels in the evening? Because I know it's a lot of work, but I definitely think that just hearing you and your ideas and thoughts, I think your voice has to be heard when it comes to refining these things, and I definitely would love to push you in that. But like we said, overall, I think you did very, very well. And so now let's think about specifically how do we reach those students that may not be reached yet,
Okay.
and we'll move forward from there.
All right.